to the Evaluation Couch with Maria Montenegro.
If you are an evaluator and you have taken a training, a workshop, maybe in a webinar, maybe even reading a book, you might have come across a cartoon that talks about evaluation in a simple way that engages you and connects and resonates. If you have experienced this, you have come across the work of Chris from Fresh Spectrum, who is my guest today. Chris and I actually go back only 7 days when he reached out to me to invite me to participate in his question and answer YouTube series, where he asked me a few questions and created cartoons out of our conversation. When he messaged me, it was very funny timing because I was actually preparing to send him a message and invite him to be a guest in my podcast because I wanted to have him talk about how he built such a unique and specific career that has resonated and connected with so many of us. Chris Lysy teaches data design and visualization to researchers and evaluators, as well as provides these services through his consultancy. And today, I feel very grateful for having him here with us. So Chris, thank you so much for being here with me today. And also thank you for that amazing gift that you shared with me of the series of cartoons that were inspired by our question and answer period. That is such a great idea. And I would love to hear more about how that idea started and where it came from.
Well, I'm really glad that you liked it. I think the idea came from years ago, I had this series of blog posts where I interviewed people as a way to generate ideas for cartoons. And I would interview a few people, turn them into a blog post, and come up with some cartoons just through answers. So I thought that maybe something like that would work pretty well on YouTube as well nowadays. So really it's just a test, and you were episode number 2. So we'll see how it goes, but it is fun. And I always generate a lot of cartoon ideas, just having nice chats with people.
Yeah, I love that. The first time that I saw the video, I hadn't seen the cartoon. So I was seeing the video and I could see the cartoon pop up where I was talking about that experience. And I found that very special, and it was surprising, but just so enjoyable to see how you drew from that specific conversation we had and that topic, a cartoon, and the creativity side of it. I loved it. So Chris, I'm very curious to hear how your career unfolded, how your very unique, specific thing that you do, which is creating cartoons, mostly around evaluation and a career in research. Can you tell us about the first time that you did an evaluation-related cartoon, what it was and what was the story behind it?
The first time I drew an evaluation cartoon, I'd already been experimenting with blogging for a couple of years at that point. And then I had Fresh Spectrum, which is my blog now. And it was probably a good 6 months into that blog before I drew any kind of cartoon. And my first cartoons were drawn in Microsoft Paint, and they were just kind of experimental. And I think my first evaluation one was like a parent reading a report and them saying, wait, this isn't your report card. And you see off screen, the kid is saying, I know, I felt my teacher was biased, so I hired an external evaluator. And that was it. That was like my first cartoon. And I put it out there as a blog post, and then I started creating more, but it really wasn't until the fall, and this is like 14 years ago, that I had my first iPad, and it made the process so much easier. So I started drawing cartoons more then, and finding I just enjoyed it, and other people enjoyed them, so I kept going.
That's interesting, and I like that idea of finding ways to make something that we like easier so that it is something that we can sustain and that we continue enjoying, so that it doesn't become a one-off cartoon, but it actually becomes part of your career and your identity, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, if you try to create anything and it's a long process or it's really hard, it has to be really worth it in the end to go through that process. But if you can simplify the process to the level where, yeah, it's not that hard, you can just do it and you enjoy the results of it, then you do more of it and you keep doing it. And over time, you build something. I never intended to draw thousands of cartoons. I was just drawing a cartoon at a time. And then all of a sudden, years later, that's what happens.
So interesting. And Chris, can you share more about how you approach a project or an idea, and what is the process of turning that into a compelling cartoon that resonates with so many people?
I think the ideas are larger than kind of conversations, right? There are certain ideas that get embedded into the things that we say and do. And some things tap into communal experiences and things that other people experience. And it's really just kind of looking for those things and trying to spotlight them and put them into a cartoon. And depending on who you're having a conversation with, there are people who, like, almost everything they say could probably become a cartoon because they say so many interesting things, or things that just touch upon things that feel relatable. So it's just about kind of pulling those things out and putting it into a simple visual format that is easy to share and is kind of fun to create and fun to look at.
Something that I am reflecting on, if anyone has seen the video of the Q&A that Chris and I did together, or one of his other videos, you will know and probably have noticed that Chris's background has a bunch of cartoons. I'm assuming they're framed.
Kind of. They're file folders ripped in half behind the cartoons. So yes, they're framed in the most simple way possible. But I was just looking for a background to have on my wall one day, and that's what I came up with. So,
and I think it's so powerful. And I see the comics behind them. They're so engaging. Like, it is that visual, simple. You probably have 2 sentences, and yet I'm like, I keep being drawn to them and wanting to know what the story behind them is, which I think speaks loudly to the different ways in which art and something like a cartoon can share a message.
I think there are sometimes, like, when you have a report or you have something that you're writing, or even just a white paper or something short or a blog post, you end up writing and then writing some more and then writing some more. But when you have a cartoon, and if your idea is to create a simple single panel cartoon that'll stand out in social media, people can see in a presentation, then you have to be really simple and short and interesting in a very just brief way. So it makes you rethink, like, how you present something. How do you get to the essence of something? And that's kind of what I try to do with cartoons. And successful sometimes not so much, but you do enough of it and you can find enough successful cartoons that become popular.
Definitely. So Chris, from your website and reading about your background, I know that you actually didn't study graphic design. You used to be in a position that was similar to evaluation, where you work with data, reported statistics, did reports, and through that, you started doing data visualization. And that led you to what you do today. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience and what was going through your mind as you were finding this career opportunity in design?
It wasn't overly intentional for me. I have a master's in sociology. I was working in contract research on large national data collections and that kind of thing for years. I lived in Canada for about 6 months. I married a Canadian, and then I came back here to the US and joined a small nonprofit. And that was kind of my introduction to evaluation, was in that nonprofit here in the US, doing early childhood data work. It was during that time I also went to a talk by Edward Tufte, and it got me interested in trying to do more with my charts and other things. I started playing around and creating things and working with my data and trying to do more visual things and seeing how I could present it to my boss that she would actually pay attention. I had one of those bosses that whenever you would talk data, they would fall asleep, like, almost instantly. She wasn't a data person. So trying to communicate with her, trying to communicate with the executive director, it really kind of pushed me in terms of the challenges of doing that. Also in sharing data with, we have 100 counties in North Carolina, and we had representatives in like every single county. So you have all different types of capacity. So working with all these different people and trying to communicate numbers and stories and other pieces so that they can understand it and use it. It really, really created a practical need to learn a little bit more about design. And that's kind of what got me into the field a little bit.
Very interesting having that experience of someone that actually doesn't come from a similar background than yours to test what works and how to create things that are compelling and used. Can you share about a specific moment or experience that made you realize that you wanted to make this more part of your career rather than an additional skill that you were developing?
I think it's something also that naturally developed and evolved over time. It wasn't intentional. I was doing a lot of data stuff, and then I was doing some design stuff. And in my data job, I would be creating some design things, or I'd be developing websites and doing that kind of thing with my blogs and other pieces, and then developing websites for others, doing more charts and infographics, talking about data visualization at conferences, teaching some of the stuff. But I was still doing the regular data analyst stuff, data collection stuff, survey development, design, analysis, your regular descriptive stats, all that kind of stuff. And I was doing both of those things in parallel. And then over time, I would bounce back and forth. And then all of the things just started coming together to find themselves into like a unique career all of its own. It was just kind of following interests and project needs from time to time, and doing a lot of self-learning and sharing and learning through my blog and presentations and those kind of things.
One thing I'm wondering is, when you started integrating this tool in your work, because it sounds like it was more out of your interest rather than someone telling you, we need to embed infographics and design so that we make this more compelling. Do you remember what that process looked like of taking the initiative to say, I'm going to try something new to make my work more impactful?
There are opportunities or increasing opportunities. All of a sudden, you're working on a project and there's a community of practice, or that it is digital and online, or there's some kind of social media aspect, or there's some kind of report that they want to have like more visuals. Or maybe you have a client who is interested in having an interesting report or something different. So you get these kind of questions. And when those kind of questions come up, you would find these opportunities where a vice president would be like, yeah, they're asking for some kind of visual dashboard thing. Do we know anybody who can do this? And at that point, because I had been developing my own skill set on the side for so many years, I could step in and answer some of these questions that other people who were maybe higher in the food chain in terms of research experience and that sort of thing couldn't answer because they didn't have that experience. So I could just be opportunistic and follow the challenges. And as time goes, there are more opportunities to do creative work within our research and evaluation jobs, because that's how we reach people and connect with others.
Yeah, the connection definitely resonates with me. I felt a lot of that this morning when I was seeing the series of cartoons that you drew from our conversation. And that's what I would describe it as, that connection that you feel. And Chris, when thinking about that experience of your beginning, I'm wondering if you faced any pushback because you were doing something different.
It's a challenge. I think I've always kind of faced pushback. My brain does not stop. I definitely have ADHD. I definitely am all over the place. I dive down different rabbit holes. I know you do too. I saw you had an episode about that as well. So I need to keep my brain engaged in doing different things. Even if you're in a really conservative organization, like, how do you get something super creative in an organization that's really super conservative or slow moving? Well, it's possible. You just have to work at it and figure out how to do that. And so that became a challenge in its own right. It's like, well, how can you do that? And there are definitely different ways, usually just by sometimes doing double work, like create the boring thing, but create the interesting thing on the side and say, which one do you like better? That works pretty well. Creating a process and saying, we're going to work through this process, and getting them to agree and sign on the process in the beginning. And then that way you have them sign off on stages. That way it's not like you show up with something innovative and new and they're like, oh, what is this? No, we can't do this. it's different, especially if you get sign off along the way. So there are definitely ways to do that and reduce those kind of challenges.
Yes, thank you. That's very powerful. So, Chris, can you share a bit what happened after? So, design started integrating with data and research and the work that you were doing. You were having this blog and these side activities. At what point did you fully transition into your consulting that focused on design and the things that you teach now? Because now you also teach others these skills.
Yeah, I'd say it was kind of in the middle of my career. I'd been in research and evaluation for like 13 years. Inside a larger research organization, I was still finding that I would have to bounce back and forth between design and research or design and evaluation. And I couldn't do them both together. Like I didn't have those kind of projects. I'd have one project where I'd be doing one thing, one project where I'd be doing the other thing. I also started doing some code. So I was coding in there too. So that's a totally different stream of projects. And it felt more like I was doing a bunch of different things rather than doing anything unique or interesting. That was kind of a combination of all of them. So it kind of led me towards thinking I should go off and set off on my own. Honestly, though, looking back, if I could go back years, I probably would have stayed in my job for at least a little bit longer, because being a consultant is hard, especially in the beginning when you're trying to find clients where all of a sudden you have to develop a business, develop an identity, but also have a product that people want and would pay for. And it's a challenge and a struggle. My wife and daughter at home, my wife homeschools my daughter. So we're on one income. So it's like a challenge there. We're in the US, so you don't just get healthcare. Like we have that challenge as well. And so these kind of things, I mean, had a lot of stress. And then when you have family issues, other things, they add even more stress. So there were all these moments where, you know, I kind of wish I could go back and change some of that. But right now, I can't really see doing anything different from what I'm doing now. It took a while to get there. Might have made different choices if I could go back. But right now, I'm pretty happy with the direction my career is going and the way my consultancy is going and training and that sort of thing.
Thank you for sharing that experience and the challenges and also where you're at now. And it is part of the journey, Chris. And I know there's many people that throughout their careers, as they have full-time jobs, they also consider consulting. Do you have any advice for people that are in that stage with what you have learned now?
Yeah, there's the tendency when thinking about going into becoming a consultant, thinking that, okay, well, I have to set my rates. I have to figure out how my business is structured. I have to figure out, I need to build a website and do that kind of thing. But ultimately, it's more like, okay, how do I have a salary similar to what I do right now, but doing things that are interesting to me? What would that look like? How many clients would I actually need? How much money would those clients have to give me in order to get there? And if I need to get that much from that many clients, how big projects do I need to have? And start with the budgets and work your way backwards. If you focus too much on your rate, you might be able to get a really good rate for 10 hours, but that's it for an entire year. That's not going to make your salary. But if you could have a lower rate, but you have a project that is sustainable across multiple years, I mean, that's ideal. Like if you can get a couple anchor clients. So it's those kind of business things that are the biggest challenge. And a lot of times finding a few of those clients, that the idea is to go like a freelance route. You should try to find one or two before you leave your job if you can. And if you can find those, you can really make a run. It's hard to do it if you have just a ton of little projects, because then you have too many clients and you start going crazy because you start running around in circles.
Thank you. That's so much great advice. The one thing that I'm realizing is that I was hoping that we spoke about the uniqueness of your career. And in a way, I was thinking of the uniqueness of your skill. But throughout this conversation, I'm realizing that part of your unique career is that you developed this different set of skills that allowed you to diversify what you were doing and the type of projects you were doing?
I think that's true. I think none of it was intentional. I think you also had an episode on planned happenstance. And I saw that term. I'm like, yeah, it's, you just kind of do things, you learn things over time, it develops into something. We don't know what the world is going to look like in 10 years. It's changed really rapidly in the last 20. It's completely different in terms of the way you would approach an evaluation business now than it would have been 2 decades ago. So what does that mean? What is it going to look like in 10 years? For me, I think having something like you have this podcast, other people have blogs, their YouTube channels, you can have newsletters, these kind of things. If you have something you control, that you own, that you get to decide, what episodes you're going to put out, who you're going to talk to, what you're going to talk about, I think that creates a path that you can start experimenting and start developing your own set of experience. Because when you get into a job, once you have those basic requirements of a job, the tendency is like, okay, how can I get better at this job or build on those basic requirements? But if you really want to stand out, once you have the basic requirements of the job, then your way to stand out is to learn things that other people in your office don't know, so that you can be the expert in something that the people around you don't know how to do. Then you become valuable. My stuff with web design, my stuff with graphic design, I can mix that with evaluation. And if I can go into any evaluation office and have value, even just doing the illustration work, I can do that mixed with evaluation. And it creates value because I can still speak the same language as evaluators, but I can also speak this design language too. And it gives me something extra and allows me to stand out. But anybody can do it with all sorts of different things, and all sorts of different talents and interests and backgrounds can develop that kind of career. And just understanding that the things that make you special, lean into those a little bit.
There's so many things you mentioned there that resonate, that speak to this podcast and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Your story really shows the power of curiosity, of taking action, of seeing opportunities and jumping into them, leaning into them, and seeing what happens with an open mind, not necessarily with a goal in mind. And another thing I want to highlight from what you said that I think has come throughout the conversation is identifying how that uniqueness and the value that you add can help others.
It can, and you start to see that. And that's why I love blogging and social media blogging, and LinkedIn's not so bad. And having an email list and those kind of things, and even presentations where you can create things, you can put them out there, and then you can see how people respond. You can hear from them, and then you can adjust and keep tweaking and iterating. And then over time, you build something. I didn't go into any of this thinking, okay, I'm going to have hundreds of blog posts and I'm going to create thousands of cartoons. You just start with one, and then you do another one the next week. And then years later, you have a collection, and you build something that you can share, that people can use. It's not something anybody has to give you permission to do. You can take that permission. You can do it. You can just go out there and create stuff, and then try to create better stuff.
I like that. And creating better stuff that help and resonate with others. You made me remember last night, I was having dinner with a friend, and she asked me about my podcast. And one of the questions she asked was like, so what are the goals that you're setting for the number of listeners? And I was like, no, actually, I have never thought about a number. And when I released the podcast, I had no idea what to expect. So even as I started seeing the views, I was like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I don't know. Because my goal was, as what you mentioned, it was creating something that could help others. And what I say to myself is if this helps one person, I've completed my mission. That's what I want. And yeah, it's interesting when we think about what we build, why we build it, building our brand, social media, all the opportunities that are out there. And I like how you're bringing up kind of the mentality behind it and how it can evolve.
Even the cartoons I drew for our conversation the last time, I drew those cartoons for you. And so if they felt special to you, I'm glad because I drew them for you. And I knew other people would get something out of it because your experiences are unique to you, but they're also universal in a way that other people will resonate. You talked about your own evaluation journey, how you kind of fell into evaluation. Vast majority of people fall into the field of evaluation. They don't find it in school. They find it after school. And then they kind of work their way into it through their career. And it's that kind of thing that, when you talk about your own show, I think that's the way to think about it in terms of creating. But the cool thing is that you'll create these episodes and the number of viewers you get, if you think about it like a conference room at a conference, and let's say you get 100 people, 200 people show up in a room, you're going to be pretty happy to speak to that room. So you should be pretty happy if you have an episode that has 100, 200 listens. That's a win in this kind of field. And then when you have episodes that reach thousands, then you're like, wow, this is amazing. I couldn't do this in any other way. And it's just about taking these opportunities and doing something. And that's what you're doing here. So yeah, it's a big market. You're going to reach more people than I think you expect.
Yeah, and with your cartoons, unfortunately, you don't have views or metrics of shares, but I know I've been in trainings, in circles. I have shared your cartoons over and over again, even the ones that you created years ago, because they're still there. And that is another plus of creating something that you own, using the digital platforms to do that. They will stay there forever. And maybe, for example, if you have a conversation with someone and this idea of planned happenstance comes up, you might say, I heard an episode about that. I'm going to send it to you. And they will remain there until we decide to remove them if we ever do.
Yeah. Great stuff. It might feel overwhelming. It might feel like everything's been said or done. But if you Google some of the things you're interested in, are you satisfied by what comes up in the search results? If you're not satisfied, why don't you make a change in that? You can create something that meets the kind of search parameters and fill these gaps in the web. As time goes on, we have this responsibility not just to keep our ideas to ourselves, but to turn them into something that can be shared, that can be read and learned from. It's like building a literature, building up academic literature, but it's not academic literature. It's just social stuff, and it's infographics and blog posts and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. But it creates a record, and it creates an asset and a legacy.
Yeah, I agree. So, Chris, thinking about your legacy, in what ways do you think your cartoons have made a positive impact in the field of evaluation?
I think what they do really well is speed up a conversation. I think there are a lot of ways in which you can talk about evaluation if you have expertise and you've learned enough of it, that it's really easy to kind of talk to somebody new and feel like you're over talking or you're going too deep. And like, how do you get somebody into it? And that's what I try to do with a lot of my cartoons. It's like, how do we get somebody into the conversation as quickly as possible? And how do we get them to the challenging part, the interesting part, as fast as possible? And if we can do that with a cartoon and make it super easy for somebody to look and go, oh, that's the difference between those two different types of evaluation. Oh, okay, now I can talk about it. Or, oh, I see the problem. I see the issue there. And then you have a conversation. So just like, how do you introduce that conversation? Get people up to speed as quickly as possible so nobody feels like they're talking down to other people.
As you were describing what your cartoons do, I was thinking that you use plain language and you simplify an idea and present it in an accessible and engaging way. And in one of my episodes, I talk about how when we do not use plain language, it acts as a way of gatekeeping knowledge. And in evaluation, we're really great at thinking about equity and diversity and inclusion and advocating for the voices that we hear. And I find that sometimes we're not so great at looking at how the way we talk about our field, about our practice, about evaluation concepts excludes people.
It can be hard because a lot of evaluators have graduate degrees, master's degrees, and they're super smart, they're well-read, they're well-rounded, they're really experienced in all sorts. But because you've read so much, it can be harder to tap into that interesting thing that made it interesting in the first place, that is more universal, that can connect with others. And it can be really hard. And sometimes just changing the format of what you're creating can change the way you talk about it. So one of the tricks is don't try to write an academic paper for all audiences. Create an infographic. Try to create a slide deck or a carousel on social media that can connect to people. The change in the format will change how you talk. Sometimes it's just about changing the way that you reach people so that you can change yourself and how you reach out to people.
Yeah, again, back to that importance of connecting with people, which is so important for our work to have an impact. As we're wrapping up, Chris, what advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue a career that is non-traditional and maybe mix these passions and different skills that they are developing and trying to come up with how to put them together and create something unique that represents them and what they bring to the table?
Yeah, I think ultimately what your career looks like, I mean, you need to make enough money to live in the life that you want to live. And then outside of that, it's really about just do whatever you want, follow your interests, your instincts, and just test out things. The idea of like a traditional career is changing. More and more jobs are consultancies that don't necessarily carry full benefits or vacation days or anything like that. You know, in the US, not necessarily having healthcare and that kind of thing involved with that. So all of a sudden, why not try something non-traditional? Because your traditional job has become non-traditional. So it's just find ways to make enough money to live and find ways to add as much value as you can to the world. And I think if you mix those two things, you can have a fulfilling career eventually. What that looks like, who knows? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out mine. And, you know, it's getting a little bit more clear than it was 10 years ago, but it's still developing.
And it always will be, likely. So the place where you are right now will continue to evolve no matter how many years you have in the field.
Yep, exactly. It will. Go create stuff, though. Create as much stuff as you can. Try to put your ideas on paper. Try to put them into blog posts. Try to put them into podcasts. Try to put them into things that will last. Some of my more interesting cartoons, I think I developed 12 years ago before I knew how to draw a picture really well, but that's fine. The cartoon still works and people still use it and it still has value. And it has value because it's out there in the world, and it's not out there in the world unless you put it out there in the world. And so whoever you are, go out there and just create something and share it. And if you're on LinkedIn, share it with me. You know, you can tag me. I'll like it. I'll look at it. So you will always have an audience of at least one person.
Thank you, Chris. That is such valuable advice. And I love your generosity in offering to be that audience, to give that feedback to people that are starting to create content. I'm going to jump into that. Also tag me. I'm happy. If you have an idea, send me a message on LinkedIn, and happy to talk about these things. Chris, if people would like to learn a bit more about your work, what is the best way to do that?
I think it's to head to my website at freshspectrum.com, and especially go to my resource library at freshspectrum.com/library. I have all my cartoons there. You can find links to my YouTube channel. You can find all my blog posts. I also have free ebooks, and I have courses that lead into data design courses and that sort of thing.
Great. Thank you so much. And you will find the links on the description of this episode. And if you are someone that's starting your career and you are figuring out how to explain what you do to others, I definitely recommend using one of these cartoons. I have done it in the past, and you have probably seen them used by others as well. So take advantage of this gift that Chris puts out into the world. And Chris, thank you so much for your time and also for the reciprocity and being a guest in my podcast. I really, really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for bringing me here, and thank you also for joining me for mine. So thank you, Maria.